Hello and welcome to Northern Nightmares, your home for nightmarish stories through Canada and beyond. I'm your host Andrew and welcome back to part 3 of the UFOs in America series. This week, we explore the creepy and unsettling stories of the real Men in Black. You may be asking, Andrew, are you talking about the MIBs from the movies, the ones with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones? No, those depictions of the MIBs are fun, loving heroes that defend the earth. However, they are based on the scary stories of real phenomena. For this story, you will hear me call them entities, as it's unknown if the Men in Black are humans, as they could be something else. Some say they're aliens, some say they're demons, but whatever they are considered terrifying. I'm going to spend a bit of time describing what they are, and then I'm going to tell you some in-depth first-hand accounts. This is one story that's always fascinated and intrigued me over the years. Some claim to have weird experiences when discussing them. Last podcast on the left, many years ago, covered them. Henry and Marcus both claimed they experienced weird phone calls and unusual activity when researching them. I've never had anything happen to me yet while preparing for this episode, but something weird did occur. When making a story post for this, I uploaded the story a few times and the music I picked was not playing for me, even though it did during the edit. The song was to be the funny, but yet lovable Men in Black song by Will Smith. I have no idea why it didn't work, and it was the first time something like that has ever happened. So let's deep dive into this because I promise you there'll be a few freaky encounters. So if you smoke weed, you might want to roll one up because this is going to be one weird out-of-this-world story. The Men in Black phenomena started sometime in the late 40s and into the 50s when the UFO craze began. This is the earliest record of these instances. Now, there are some theories that claim that records of these entities go back thousands of years, but for this story, I'm going to keep it simple and stay within the last century. Anyone that noticed UFOs or goes public with their claims have reported being visited by one, maybe two, government-looking individuals. They claim that these people are dressed in black suits, wearing a fedora sometimes, with expressionless features. Some even claim they have no eyebrows and even have bright red lips. They are also extremely pale, almost white, with no hair, and their expressions are unusual. These G-men are known to interrogate, threaten, and even harass people in staying silent about what they claim they've seen. Not unlike the Hollywood movies where Agent J, Will Smith's character, flashes you with a light and you just simply forget. Anyone that's experienced a visit by the MIB have claimed to be totally terrified after the ordeal, often following the demands in fear of what else could happen. Similar to the movies, these G-men don't want us to know that UFOs and aliens are closer to us than we think. Discovering the truth could cause a mass global panic, so their goal is to keep us quiet from finding out the truth. Allegedly, the MIB tend to act very unlike us. Some stories claim this by the way they talk, how they sound, and even move. One story claims that when an MIB left a resident's home, they moved all disjointed and freaky. If you remember the first MIB movie, there's a scene with Vincent D'Onofrio where he plays a cockroach alien in human disguise. The scene involves him walking down the street, walking all funny and wacky. This real MIB encounter was similar to that scene, but I'll get to that story in a bit. Theories even claim that the MIB could be aliens in disguise, scaring us humans from discovering the truth about them. Allegedly, there's claims that aliens do hide among us, for example, like the reptilian race or lizard people. But that's a story for another day. There's a theory that suggests that the MIBs are demons, as some claim they smell sulfur when they are visited. Usually, with the presence of a demon, usually traces of sulfurs can be found. I think the best theory of what the MIB could be is that they are tulpas. Tulpas are thought-form entities, usually created by a mass energy from collected consciousness. In simple terms, if a bunch of us all thought about the same thing, we could bring something that doesn't exist into existence. For example, quite a few years ago, the idea of Slender Man was an internet meme, thought as some supernatural entity. When the phenomena went viral, two 12-year-olds lured a friend of theirs into the woods and stabbed them to death, claiming Slender Man told them to do it. It could just be two young girls with a mental illness using it as an excuse to cover up their crime. But what if the psychic consciousness of us brought it to life? Another example is Freddy Krueger. His threat of attacking the kids brought the fear to their parents. What if that fear gave the idea power and it brought Freddy to life as the dream-walking terror we know? You could call Tulpas a thought-form energy ghost. And that is the theory with Men in Black. We believe there could be some secret agency protecting the secrets of UFOs and aliens that people thought the idea into reality. Whatever you believe, though, the idea of the Men in Black are freaky enough. But if you are truly not convinced yet, let me tell you some of the top encounters that still mystify the UFO community. So let's go through a few of the most famous stories of MIB encounters that still terrify some of us to this day. The first one was on September 11th, 1976, when Dr. Herbert Hopkins had a visitor arrive at his home. Hopkins was working as a consultant for a UFO case in Maine of that year. In August, 4 artists reported seeing a massive, silent, and glowing light while camping. They claim an abduction happened during this trip, and this was discovered when the individuals were under hypnosis. This case sounds very similar to the Betty and Barney Hill story. This case was called the Allagash Wilderness UFO. Now, Hopkins on September 11th received a phone call that evening from someone claiming to be an activist for the UFO community, and they wanted to discuss the case. Hopkins, agreeing to the visit, didn't expect to see the person only minutes after he hung up. This man was wearing a black suit, tie, hairless, with no eyebrows, and extremely pale. And after entering his home, Hopkins' dog went crazy, erratically barking. The dog was terrified of the visitor. After the visitor finished up with their questions, the encounter would only get stranger. The man told Hopkins that he had 2 coins in his pocket. Hopkins told him he was correct, and the man told him to take one out and hold it. This was a brand new, shiny penny. They asked Hopkins to watch the coin closely, and in doing so, he could see the coin started to develop a silvery appearance, and then it seemed to be going out of focus. The coin then started to fade, and it vanished right before his very eyes. The visitor told Hopkins that the coin will never be seen again, as it disappeared from this plane of existence. Then he proceeded to ask if Hopkins was familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill case, to which he answered he was familiar, like he's heard of it, but not familiar with the couple. Hopkins then said that he heard that Barney had passed away a couple years ago, and if you remember from that episode, he passed away in '69. The visitor had told him he was correct, and then said the following: Barney had no heart, just like you have no coin, and then advised him of destroying all evidence that he had possessed of UFOs, and left Hopkins home for good, never to be seen again. And also, for the record, Barney Hill died of a cerebral hemorrhage, nothing heart-related, but Hopkins didn't know that. The theory is that the MIB caused Barney Hill to pass away. After this encounter, Hopkins was extremely shaken up by this. With no time to think about it, he burned all his files, took a magnet to all his VHS tapes, making sure there was nothing left. The only thing that happened after this was Hopkins would receive many weird phone calls and a lot of phone troubles, like connection losses. The phone company claimed that there could be issues with his phone line or even the possibility that his phone was being tapped. Needless to say, Hopkins gave up on the UFOs after this encounter. In 1955, there was a famous researcher by the name of Dr. Albert K. Bender. Now, this guy was a character without needing the MIB, but a little backstory: Bender served the U.S. military Air Force during World War II. He was honorarily discharged from the service in Langley Field, Virginia, and then relocated to Bridgeport to live with his mother and stepfather. Albert was employed as chief timekeeper at the Acme Shear Co., the world's largest manufacturer of scissors. And I think Bender had a weird sense of humor because he loved his job so much. He filled his home full of clocks that would ring every 15 minutes, half an hour on the hour. His home would vibrate from the sounds of many bells, but this wasn't his only weird thing. He loved living in the attic, to which he had decorated with interesting horror-related items, from skulls, shrunken heads, and strange artworks. He also had a weird Halloween-like music and creepy sounds on loop. This dude basically had his own haunted house in his attic that would take his friends there to try and scare them. He called this his Chamber of Horrors. Bender loved everything supernatural and the horror world. It is no surprise that he would find the UFO world just as entertaining. He would be the founder of the International Flying Saucer Bureau, or FISB. Well, in 1955, he claimed to have some serious intel that he had planned on dropping for the public. It held info about the US government had in some way covered up proof of aliens and UFOs. He had planned to release this collection in a paper and send it to the journalism company, the Space Review. That is until one day he was visited at his home by none other than an MIB. Bender claims that 3 men, all dressed in black suits, looking pale and expressionless faces, visited him. No one knows what exactly was said, but after the visit, many claim that Bender was a changed person, and not in a good way. He was super paranoid, jumpy, always watching over his shoulder. He shut down the IFSB and destroying all evidence he had owned, ending his career in the UFO community. Anything he did work on later in life was full of unreadable ramblings, nothing coherent and making no sense. Up to his passing in 2002, Bender was a shell of a man he used to be before his encounter. On June 21st, 1947, Howard Dow and his son were out collecting logs in a fishing boat near Maury Lake, Washington. The pair spotted at least 6 donut-shaped crafts in the sky, and allegedly it dropped some kind of molten waste in the water. This waste allegedly injured Dow's son and killed their dog. The Maury Island UFO incident was an event some witnessed 6 to even 7 round-shaped objects in the sky flying over the area. For Dow, a few days later after the incident, and discussing his ordeal to friends and family, he was visited by someone. This someone was an MIB. This MIB urged that Dow must not discuss this event anymore or else. Dow's story and the story of his encounter caught the attention of the FBI, as he was visited by several agents that were collecting info on the incident. An official report was released on the matter, but for Dow, he later claimed that the whole thing was nothing but a hoax, as he feared of being visited by the MIB again. On May 23, 1964, a man named Jim Templeton took his 5-year-old daughter out to enjoy the day. They went to a location called Burgh Marsh. It's a grassy field overlooking the Solway Firth in Cumbria, England. The Solway Firth is a major inlet of the Irish Sea that forms part of the border between the countries of jolly old England and the bagpipe nation of the world, Scotland. While upon taking some photos, Jim noticed a strange-looking figure appearing just behind and above his daughter's head. However, Jim swears there was no other person there before the picture. He had the film verified by a Kodak picture representative to make sure it was legit and to why it happened. It was confirmed not tampered with, and the photo did capture something freaky, which looks like your typical astronaut. Jim went public with his picture, and the story was big news. Shortly after going public, though, Jim was visited by two men in black suits, looking like government agents, and they both stated their names were the number 9 and the number 10. They interrogated Jim for hours, getting every bit of info out of him. They also demanded to be taken to the site to which the photo was taken. When Jim showed him, he stated that he never seen any figure during that day, to which the G-men became angry and left the field in a hurry. A couple days later, Jim was contacted by two employees that worked at a launch pad in Australia. The two claimed to see two individuals wearing suits exactly like the one in the photo with his daughter. They noticed as on a security camera, the suited people were working on missiles at the time. These missiles, before going to Australia, were produced not 20 miles away from where the photo location was. Needless to say, the event baffled Jim and everyone involved. I have two more final stories for you that add a little more folklore to the MIB legends. In November 1961 in North Dakota, a man named Paul Miller was returning home from a recent hunting trip. Upon his journey, he noticed a very bright object in the sky. It was a disc-shaped craft, and it happened to land in a field. Miller went to investigate it, and upon getting a closer look, a door opened and two humanoid figures exited. Miller, being freaked out, took a shot at one of them, injuring it, and the two figures fled back inside. Miller ran for his life and drove all the way home. He recounts that he lost about 3 hours of time from that incident and going home with no memories at all, but he just kind of shrugged it off. The next day, he never spoke a word of the incident to anyone. He worked for the U.S. Air Force at a local base. Upon getting to work, 3 men in black suits confronted him, telling him that they knew everything about the incident and everything about him. They also told Miller it would be best to forget the whole thing and speak none of it to anyone. After this encounter, Miller kept to his word and told no one, until many years later when this info would become public. This last story, I'm not really sure if it's MIB related or not, but the celebrity attached to it claims otherwise. In 2002, Dan Aykroyd was filming a paranormal show for the Sci-Fi Channel. Dan Aykroyd, as you know, is a famous actor and comedian appearing in movies like Ghostbusters, The Coneheads, Nothing But Trouble, and etc. Dan has always been obsessed with the paranormal and UFOs, which plays a lot into his career. Like, for example, when writing Ghostbusters, the original concept that he had made was a lost carrier, but it was asked to be toned down. Also, the villain in the first movie, Gozer, was based on the fact the name appeared a lot during the Enfield poltergeist in England. Dan believes Gozer would be a real entity somewhere out there. Anyway, when he was filming this new show, he happened to get a call. Allegedly, it was Britney Spears asking him to join her on SNL, which is a weird collab in my opinion. Well, once he got the call, he decided to take a walk outside, and during the call, he had noticed a black SUV parked across the street from the studio, and a man in a black suit got out, stood by the vehicle, and stared Dan down. Dan happened to turn away for a brief moment, but when he turned back in the direction the suit figure was, the mysterious person and vehicle was nowhere to be seen. When he returned back into the studio, he had received news that the production had stopped and the show was officially cancelled. The show never aired and still today has never been released. So whatever the show had planned, Dan claims it had connections to the MIB, and the figure he thinks was an MIB agent. Many claim that there is no such thing and the story is untrue. But Dan sticks to his claims and says he knows what he saw. I don't know if it's MIB or not, but I believe in Dan because he's extremely knowledgeable about these worlds. Whatever the MIB are, if they exist or not, there's no question the myth behind them are freaky. There are more stories out there, all very similar to the ones I've already mentioned. There are still reports as today of people being silenced by their claims of aliens and UFOs. However, they're not usually MIB, but just regular agents. But I believe the MIB are still out there, watching us and making sure that no one discovers the truth. And that concludes this series of the UFOs in America. I hope you enjoyed these freaky and unusual tales of the UFOs. I apologize too that this episode got a little delayed, as during the research, the teasing of this episode, and even filming, there was a lot of technical delays. Websites crashed on me. I had to resort to VPNs, and I've had to re-record stuff many times till I could at least get something right. I don't know if it's just a weird coincidence or I might be cursed by the MIB. Whatever it is, I guess I'll have to wait and see what might come visit me. In the next few weeks, though, we're going to have some one-off stories. Take a break from big series. I have a couple serial killer stories based in the Maritimes of Canada, and I also have another story that was a previous episode coming back for a sequel, so keep watch for that. As always, if you have any future stories, send them to northernnightmares@outlook.com. I'll see you all soon. Sweet dreams, and remember, nightmares are closer than you think.